Pop Quiz, Year 2, Unit 4, The Age of Revolutions. Welcome to the final unit of Year 2. Unit 4 covers the revolutionary eras of America and France. Younger students will be more focused on the American story. Older students will include the conditions in Europe that led to the French Revolution and its course. Rhetoric students will compare and contrast the two revolutions to be able to understand why one resulted in lasting liberty while the other turned to terror and tyranny. Along with our study of revolutionary America, we'll be studying the first years of the new nation. Within this context, we'll do a detailed study of the U.S. Constitution, its content, and the process by which it came into being. All students will also learn about the administrations of America's first two presidents, George Washington and John Adams. Our study of the U.S. Constitution is thorough, but it does not include much focus on the Supreme Court or the judicial system this year. There's a reason for that. John Marshall, the great judge who shaped American constitutional law and made the Supreme Court a center of power, did not become Chief Justice until 1801. And his notable contributions, and thus the development of the Supreme Court, came over the next 3 decades. The power of the Supreme Court as we know it today was not really envisioned by the framers of the Constitution. Therefore, in Year 3, we'll review our studies of the Constitution and delve much more deeply into constitutional law than we do in Year 2. Our primary thread this unit is the American Revolutionary War and the young American nation. We'll start with colonial culture in Week 28, with a focus on the great British evangelists, George Whitefield and John Wesley, who crisscrossed America during the Great Awakening in the 1730s. That powerful religious movement brought all kinds of people together in a new way. Calvinists and Arminians came together to proclaim a gospel which changed the lives of people, whether they were rich or poor, black or white, northern or southern colonists. The Great Awakening had a powerful impact on England, and it changed America forever. After that first week of unity, however, we'll start to see tensions building up between the English colonies and their mother country. Week 29 deals with the French and Indian War, which changed how the colonies viewed themselves in relation to Great Britain and how George III regarded them. For 7 years, much of Europe was racked by wars that pitted France and Spain and Austria against England and her ally, Prussia. The war ended with an expensive English victory that broke the back of France forever. Week 30 involves a detailed study of the years from 1763 to 1775. The Great War gave Britain a new global empire, but increased the British national debt by 1,000,000%. King George's government decided to make the American colonies start paying taxes, a decision which violated some fundamental assumptions about the relationship between English kings and their British subjects. King George was of German stock, and the American colonies were far away, but his insistence on levying taxes and their refusal to pay them put the British and American peoples on a course that was bound to end in war. Blood was spilled in April 1775 when redcoats and Minutemen started shooting one another at a bridge in Lexington, Massachusetts. That escalated into war when the American colonies assembled in a Continental Congress and agreed that it was time to take up arms in self-defense. Skirmishes turned to battles, and battles to campaigns as each side settled down to waging war. In Week 31, we trace the first year and a half of that conflict. In Week 32, we study the rest of the war. It's one thing to win the war. It's another thing to win the peace. In Week 33, we'll look in detail at the brief period during which America was governed under the Articles of Confederation, 1778 to 1787. We'll see that America very nearly failed in her infancy. Students will learn what aspects of the Articles hampered the new central government from adequately leading the new nation. The failure of the Articles of Confederation made the success of the Constitution possible. We'll learn how and why we got the Constitution in Week 34, and see how America ratified it in 35. We'll study the presidency of George Washington that week, too, and we'll see why he is still known as the father of our country. In Weeks 35 through 36, older students especially will take a good hard look at the French Revolution. That started off with lofty ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, but it ended in terror and tyranny. The French Revolution exploded in 1789, the same year George Washington became president. France grew more violent and unstable throughout Washington's presidency and into the first 2 years of the next presidency, as John Adams took over. In 1799, Napoleon emerged as the new leader of France, ending the French Revolution and leading to the French Empire. In studying the administrations of George Washington and John Adams, we'll see that the French upheaval presented both of these early American leaders with significant challenges. Their responses to these circumstances both shaped and challenged the early American nation. History is one long story of God's amazing unfolding plan. It's hard to come to a good stopping place within that story for each of our year plans, and Year 2 is no different. We've chosen 1800 as our endpoint for Year 2. As you bring the year plan to a close, please be aware of the following threads that will be continued in Year 3, Unit 1. John Adams is a figure that spans 2 year plans. He served after George Washington. He was elected in 1796, inaugurated in 1797, and turned the presidency over to his vice president, Thomas Jefferson, in 1801. That seems pretty normal to modern Americans, but it was a major crisis back then because Thomas Jefferson was Adams's opponent in the election of 1796, not his running mate. The original Constitution made the person with the second most votes vice president. Jefferson and Adams were diametrically opposed on many major issues, which made the second and third presidencies much more difficult. One thing that divided Adams and Jefferson was the French Revolution. We'll cover that twice, once at the end of Year 2 and once at the start of Year 3. Napoleon Bonaparte took advantage of the troubled times to seize power in 1799. We are making older students aware that this was the end point for the French Revolution, but at the same time they need to understand that the French would not have seen it that way in 1799. Napoleon used the rhetoric and forms of revolutionary France even as he gathered the reins of power into his own hands. In 1799 his title was First Consul of the Republic, and he nominally shared power with 2 other consuls. Students will learn about him only in this context. They won't do a detailed study of Napoleon's reign until Year 3. When you complete this unit, your family will be halfway through the 4-year cycle of Tapestry of Grace. Year 1 covers the history of the world from creation to the fall of Rome in AD 475. Year 2 covers 475 to 1800. Year 3 covers 1800 to 1900, and Year 4 brings us up to the present. Why do we spend half our 4-year cycle on just the last 2 centuries? It's not because the last 2 centuries are the most fun, or even the most interesting. It's because we believe God calls parents to prepare their children to fulfill His purposes in their own generation, and that means they need to be prepared to answer the questions of our day in light of God's unchanging Word. We'll cover less than 50 years this unit, but many of the years that we will cover are as relevant as yesterday. It won't be long before your children will be standing up for what they believe in the public square. We pray that what they learn about faith and freedom over the next 9 weeks will stand them in good stead for the rest of their lives. Every father's task is to prepare his children for an unpredictable tomorrow. You'll have great opportunities to do just that as you lead your children through this age of revolutions. In 12 short years, America went from being the crown jewel of Britain's global empire to her declared enemy. That's how long it takes to go from first grade to graduating high school. Who knows how your child's world will change in the next 12 years? Who knows? God knows. That's good news for Christian parents. God knows exactly what your child will face in his or her future, and He's given us exactly what we need to prepare them for it. We don't have a crystal ball or next week's newspaper. We have His unchanging Word plus the example of the past. May God bless you as you prepare your child for the future.